Hello, and welcome to the Bowling University studios from the International Bowling Campus in Arlington, Texas. I'm Gerald Morrow, and I'll be your host for this edition of the Bowling University Profit Break. Thank you for joining us. Our mission here at Bowling University is to enrich people's lives personally and professionally. And the Profit Break is an opportunity for sharing insights on how to grow revenue, reduce cost, enrich yourself, your team, and your business. If you're joining the Profit Break for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. Give us 15 minutes and you'll be well on your way to improving your profitability. On today's show, we're going to talk about doing the right thing when it comes to taking care of your team and your guests. Yes, we're in the business of fun, but we can't ignore the world around us. Protecting our guests and our team members is a top priority that begins with training our team on what to do when something happens. So let's jump right in. Today we're going to be talking about this whole idea of safety and security and just being aware and being prepared for something that could happen at the facilities. And so it's not a fun topic to talk about, but we've got to talk about it. So we'll start off by talking about active shooters. And active shooter incidents have increased and almost doubled since 2017. And while we don't have the latest statistics for 2022, to think that they've increased 52% from 2020 to 2021, that's a big deal. So we've got to make sure that we understand that our team has to be prepared to handle situations such as an active shooter. And we can do this, and we've got to think about, is our center at risk? So here's 5 questions I want you to answer for yourself, and that every business, a small business, should answer in today's society. We're going to talk about each of these. So do you and your team members know what to do during an active shooter situation? Do you or your team members know what to do during a robbery? Do you and your team members know what to do if a guest is injured? Is it documented, or is this tribal knowledge that we just pass on from one employee that trains another employee? Or do we have this in writing? And are we doing training, structured training, to handle these situations? So you don't have to answer. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, I have some of that, or we pass this on. That's great, but if you can't answer yes to all 5, then the good news is we can help you get there and help you take care of your team and your guest. Bowling University, thanks to members like you that provided us feedback, worked on 3 courses that were developed that were specific for active shooter preparedness, robbery preparedness, and incident response and reporting. So with that, we're going to start off, as I mentioned earlier, active shooter. Active shooter is a big deal. And I put this up here because some people will say, hey, what's the definition? Is this an active shooter? Is that an active shooter? Of course, not to get into politics, but the government has to come up with an agreed upon definition. So it's there. An active shooter situation can happen literally anywhere, but that's the official definition. So the courses are based off of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. They came up with training and preparedness training for active shooter situations. So we wanted to take those and bring those home to a bowling facility. So it's broken down to 3 lessons. Lesson 1, we talk about preparedness. Lesson 2, they talk about what to do during an active shooter situation. And then lesson 3 is what to do when law enforcement arrives, because that could save precious moments and help law enforcement to do what they need to do when they arrive on the scene. So these things happen, and they happen quickly. An active shooter situation, as I mentioned, is really unpredictable. They happen quickly, evolve out of nowhere, and they're often over within 10 to 15 minutes. And I would say that's probably long. Sometimes these happen quickly and they're over before law enforcement is able to get there. So all of us need to be prepared both physically and mentally how to deal with and handle a situation, because We're in a facility that we've got guests, other team members, and if something happens, we've got to know what to do and where to go and what's our best options based on the training that the Homeland Security has provided and FEMA. So let's take a quick look at lesson 1 from the course.
Lafayette, Louisiana, 135 miles outside of New Orleans, where just hours ago, a man stood up in a crowded movie theater and opened fire. There are fatalities, including the gunman.
All we heard was pop, 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 pop.
This is an active shooter situation. It is not code 4. We have multiple subjects down inside and outside.
Breaking news out of California. Police say 3 people were killed and 4 injured in a shooting overnight at a bowling alley.
It has become a part of the world we live in today. According to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, active shooter situations are becoming more frequent. Most active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Because most incidents are over within minutes, we must be prepared to deal with the situation until law enforcement arrives. While we all hope to never be faced with an active shooter situation, preparedness and awareness are keys to helping protect our team members, our customers, and ourselves. The lessons shared with you during this course are based on materials from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. Lesson 1, preparedness. A lack of preparedness in responding to an active shooter can have disastrous consequences. This course is a tool to help you prepare. However, you should refer to your center's specific policies, procedures, and emergency action plans for complete details and/or consult your management and ownership. As a team member, you should always be observant of your guests to help provide them the best guest experience possible, while at the same time being aware of any suspicious activity. Know your center's procedures for reporting suspicious behavior of a guest and/or an employee. Part of being observant is to know the location of all possible exits, including the emergency exits. Keep in mind, guests will follow the lead of uniformed staff members if a situation should arise and it is necessary to exit the building. Plus, most guests would not think about potential exits located behind the machines. Again, follow your emergency action plan for reporting emergencies and evacuation of the center. Knowing these before you have to use them will save valuable time in an active shooter or any other emergency situation.
So heavy stuff there when we're talking about an active shooter situation and we're talking about preparedness. So that's the first video in the course. And we're not going to go through all the videos in the course, but I want you to have a look at what we're talking about there. You want to think about, too, is he mentioned in there, the emergency action plan. How many of you have an emergency action plan? Maybe it's not for an active shooter situation, but maybe it's for a weather-related event. Maybe it's for a robbery. You've got to have an emergency action plan. And more today, insurance companies are asking small businesses, do you have an emergency action plan? In the course, there are some additional resources, and there is an emergency action plan in there that's provided by the Department of Homeland Security that you can use as a template to start in developing that if you don't have one already. So you've got to take advantage of that resource out there, and that's why we're sharing this with you today. So lesson 2, run, hide, fight. This is the U.S. Homeland Department of Security. This is what they talk about in lesson 2. They're talking about the 3 things that you can do during an active shooter situation. And it's really just that simple. There's 3 options. You run and escape if possible. You hide and barricade yourself somewhere if you can't escape. And then last resort is to actually fight if you're in a life-threatening situation. Then move on to lesson 3. Lesson 3 is about, okay, you're in the situation, now law enforcement arrives. What do we do? Understanding the role that law enforcement has when they arrive at the facility is key. They're there to eliminate the threat as quickly as possible. They may pass you up. They may pass up other people that are hurt or injured. And they're doing that to prevent further injury and save lives. So understanding that and understanding why they're walking by an injured person, they're not helping, is key to you knowing how to interact with that law enforcement to save valuable time. We're talking seconds or minutes here that can make a huge difference. So that's active shooter preparedness. The other one we were going to talk about today and go into a little bit is we're going to talk about robbery and robbery preparedness. So when you start talking about a robbery, for a lot of us in the bowling industry, we've probably been involved in a robbery. But at the same time, have we trained our team members and given them the tools and the knowledge they need to understand how to handle a situation that can be high stress like a robbery? So with a robbery, it's no different than a burglary, except a robbery means that there's actually a person there. If somebody breaks into a facility and there's nobody there, then that's just a burglary. But we're talking about robbery and what that is. So you've got your official definition there that you can look at. But law enforcement really breaks robbery down into 3 areas, and we do the same in the course based on their recommendations. So what are some best practices? We talk about things before the robbery, during the robbery, and after the robbery, which are key. When you start breaking it down that way, it's easier for us and our teams to digest. And one of the things before the robbery is we got to understand what are those centers' policies and procedures for reporting any kind of suspicious activity. We've also got to be able to provide, and this is where our leadership comes into play, providing a safe environment for our guests and employees. We've got to make sure that the parking lot lights are working, the lights on the exterior of the building, security cameras, if you have them, they're functional, alarms, door locks. Doors are not being propped open. Back doors not being propped open late at night, and things like that. The door to the office where the safe is isn't being propped open. So we've got to understand that we've got to provide a safe environment and make sure there's the proper equipment, and if we have the equipment, that it's working. Other things are, if you see something suspicious, then say something. And your frontline team members got to know who to talk to. What should they say? Who should they report that to? And then they've got to be able to come to you and say, hey, I noticed that the lights on the side of the building are not working. They've got to report that kind of information. And the last one, which is a huge one, and I can tell you that I was guilty myself when I was working at the center, was safe cash handling. How many of us have sat there on league night and have been counting money at the open at the front desk? Could that make us a possible target? So we've got to understand that those are some things that we want to think about before the robbery. And as much as we try to prepare, nothing is going to stop a robbery from happening, but we can mitigate our circumstances. But we also got to understand what to do during a robbery.
All of a sudden, you look up and you are face to face with a robber while at work in the center. Hopefully, you will never be in this situation. But if you are, law enforcement has some recommendations for what to do during a robbery. As always, make sure to follow any policies, procedures, or emergency action plans that your center may have. The number one recommendation from law enforcement is to remain calm. Being trained and reviewing your training will help you remain calm. Next, comply with the robber or robbers. Don't be a hero. The money is not worth risking your life or the life of a guest. Avoid putting yourself or others in more danger by arguing or attempting to resist. Follow the robber's instructions. Let them know you intend to obey and don't make any sudden moves. If you must reach for something or move, tell the robber what to expect. Avoid doing anything that might agitate, threaten, surprise, or startle the robber. The longer the robbery takes, the more nervous the robber may become, and the more apt he or she will be to becoming violent. During the robbery, it is important to focus on remembering details. Being a good witness requires knowing what to look for. Make mental notes of the following details during the robbery: height, hair color, weight, voice, age, clothing, distinguishing marks such as tattoos or scars, noticeable traits such as a limp, an accent, glasses, left-handed or right-handed. Where did the robber touch? This can help when police are looking for fingerprints. Again, the number one priority during a robbery is the safety of guests and yourself. If you have specific questions about your policy, procedure, or emergency action plan, it is important to ask your center's leadership. Knowing what to do and staying calm can help you survive a robbery.
So again, very heavy stuff there talking about what to do during a robbery. A couple of key takeaways there is we don't need to be heroes. Don't be a hero. And then we've got to understand that if we're not taught or trained and don't go through any kind of training, we're not sure what to look for and what to make note of. So to be a good witness and be able to help law enforcement when they get there, we've got to know the things to look for. And so he talks about that in the course. It's looking for some of those things. Where did the robber touch? Some things like that. We've got to be able to preserve that evidence when the police get there and understand that we've got to write notes down. We all have great memories, but in a high-stress situation, a lot of things going on, as soon as that situation is over with, we've got to, one, think about calling 911 immediately. We've got to make sure that, again, we're not being a hero. We're not pursuing the robber. And then we've got to make sure that we're locking the front door or locking the doors to secure the facility. You just don't want that person coming back in. If all of a sudden they get down the street and the police are coming down the road and they turn around and come back, if you've got the doors locked, you're at least protecting yourself and your guest. And then, like I said, you're preserving evidence, you're making notes. This way you can be a good witness and help cooperate with law enforcement and understand that there may be money that is taken during this time. We can't disclose that information to anybody but law enforcement and our leadership. You don't want to be discussing details of the actual robbery or posting it on your social channel. This is for you and the law enforcement officers and your leadership to know what happened and discuss. We don't want to make ourselves a potential future target by discussing details about like how much cash was taken or details about how it happened. So you want to make sure that you understand your center's policies and procedures when it comes to that and who's going to be the person that talks. You may have media show up. Understand that you don't have to talk to the media. There should be somebody that's designated from your team, your center, that will handle those communications. So knowing that and how to handle the robbery during the robbery and then what to do after are key and critical. So today we talked about two big important courses out there, active shooter and robbery preparedness, and we don't have the time to really get into incident response and reporting, but I'm going to mention a couple things on it because when we think about incidents, active shooter and robbery are incidents. Those are huge incidents. Other things that we got to think about is we have slips, trips, and falls in our facility, cuts and burns. And an incident can happen to not only a guest, but it can be a team member as well. So we've got to understand that we've got to make note and understand that we've got to report these, how to report them, who to report them to, because this can help us with prevention in the future and help make the center safer. So with this, I would encourage every team member on your team to take all three of these courses at least. Why? Yeah, it reduces your risk and possible liability as the center or as the owner, but in the end, it's the right thing to do to take care of our team members and give them the proper training for in the event that something actually happens. Hopefully, none of you will ever have to use this. But if that day comes, at least you know you've prepared your team as to how to handle themselves during this situation. We always talk at Bowling University, we say, what if we train our team members and they leave? But what if we don't and they stay? And we always think about this as far as the customer and customer experience. But when you start thinking about it in this sense, what if we don't train them and even worse, they stay and then the unthinkable happens? Where do we go from there? So if you want to get to yes and start protecting your team members and guests, we have these 3 courses in the on-demand online training program to help you get there. If you're not sure and need help getting started, reach out to us here at Bowling University. As we wrap up another edition of the Bowling University Profit Break, remember that when your focus is on growing people, people will grow your business. We look forward to seeing you next time for another episode. If you have any questions about today's show or would like additional information, you can reach us at any time at education@bowling.edu. at bpaa.com. Also, all previous Profit Break episodes are available 24/7 for you and your team to watch at bowlinguniversity.net/profitbreak. Plus, new Profit Break episodes are available every month. So mark your calendar, watch your email, join us on Facebook to hear about the latest episodes. Until then, I'm Gerald Morrow, and do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. See you next time.